Get started. I'm Dave McKay. I'm the chair of the Economic Development Committee. And this is Julie Connolly. You're going to get introductions from all of us as the evening goes on, but I wanted to first say hello and thanks to all of you for coming out. This is a continuation of the Economic Development Committee's Downtown Initiative. This is something that we got started on, I don't know, 5 or 6 months ago as a priority for our committee and something that we wanted to look into. Julie's written an article about this and has a lot to say about it, and we felt that this was a good opportunity for the Economic Development Committee to have a real positive influence on our town that we all care so much about, and to really kind of capitalize on some of the great assets that we have in our downtown, work off of the progress that's being made with the Main Street project, and really kind of put our stamp on a project that that a lot of folks have been asking us in a variety of different ways. What are you doing about downtown? So this is one of the things that we're doing about downtown. So I think we've put together a really interesting program, a great program today. I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for their support of this initiative and our committee generally. They have been unwavering in that support. I also want to thank all the people who signed up to help us out in moderating the discussion with our working groups, and that includes Craig Nicholson from the ZBA, Julie Connolly, of course, Kathy Bartolini, who's also a member of our committee. Don Morris from the Planning Board has agreed to help Kathy and I out on the zoning piece, and Paul Pazinski from the Board of Health is here as well with Claire Reynolds. Sujal Balakia, where are you, Sujal? Oh, he just stepped out, okay. Karen Galligan will be coming later on, and Freddie Gillespie will be helping us out with one of the panel discussions as well. So certainly a special thanks to all of them. So the idea of tonight's program is really to encourage all of you to provide your feedback to us. We are in the process of developing a study of our downtown with the Urban Land Institute, and we want to come away from this not only with your ideas about downtown generally, but also your ideas to help us kind of shape the ULI study to make that exercise as productive as possible. This is intended to be a pretty informal exercise, so certainly please, we welcome your feedback, we encourage your feedback, and we hope you'll, we certainly hope you'll share it with us. That's really the goal of tonight's exercise. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who's really been spearheading this effort.
Thank you, Dave. Is this on? No, that's on.
I believe they're both on.
Okay. So as Dave said, since we started the Economic Development Committee about 4.5 years ago now, every time I've ever run into anybody in town and told them that I'm on the Economic Development Committee, they say, well, what are you doing about downtown? And that was always kind of the elephant in the room question that seems like a big one to tackle and take on. But through some work we've done in the last couple of years, and particularly through the Brokers Breakfast series that we've been hosting the last year and a half or so, we've gotten to know about some of the programs that are available to actually help do downtown revitalization efforts. So one of those programs, as Dave mentioned, was the Urban Land Institute that we learned about 6 months ago. And it really spurred a discussion and made us realize that there are some things that we might be able to do to actually affect change in the downtown area. But our goals for doing that were, number one, transparency. We wanted to make sure that this was something that we were very open about, and we committed to having lots of public meetings and making it as public as we possibly could. And two, participation of the residents, and we wanted to make sure this was, if we're going to take on this effort, we wanted to make sure it was what people wanted. And even though lots of people would come up and say, oh, we really need to do something about downtown, we realized that everybody probably had their own vision about downtown, so we wanted to figure out what that was. So we put together a pretty detailed survey that I hope a lot of you saw, that we released out back in August, and it rolled through September. And we collected 427 results, which I thought for Southborough was pretty darn good. And the results were, I felt, fairly conclusive. We got them, we put it out through every channel that we could. We put it out through the blog. We emailed it to everybody we could. We really tried to make it, cast as wide a net as we possibly could. And we were impressed with the results because we came away with a vast majority of people saying that they're interested in improvements downtown, particularly things that people were interested in were potentially, more small businesses, restaurants, coffee shops. People were interested overwhelmingly in things like trails, connectivity, a sense of community feel, really having a defined downtown area. They were interested in beautification projects, and they were interested in potentially restaurants. And there was actually over half the residents said that they would support even things like mixed-use development, where we would have a ground level small business with apartment units or condo units upstairs. So these are all things that we're talking about. And when we put out the survey, we held a meeting back in October where we rolled out the survey results and discussed them. And the message we were trying to give at the time was kind of put the problems aside. What is your vision? If everything were on the table, if we didn't have any bumps in the road or any roadblocks, what do you want to see? So we had a great discussion around that, but of course it's going to come back to there are some real issues with getting anything done downtown, and there are things that we're all very familiar with, one being zoning, another being infrastructure issues and septic and sewer issues, and then getting people who can invest in downtown in a productive way. And then when we talk about trails and connectivity, that's a huge project. How do we make that happen? So after we had our discussion in October, we thought, okay, before we submit an application to ULI, we need to pull in our local resources here and see what we know so far, because we don't want to work with ULI in a way that they're duplicating efforts, or because they only have a certain number of resources. So we wanted to make sure that we were giving them as complete a picture as we possibly could before they came and did their piece. So for this session, we've asked a little panel of experts to come, and the format is going to be that we're going to divide into 4 groups. The first group is going to be, I'm going to be part of, along with Craig Nicholson, who is a background in development, and we're going to talk about issues like, what kind of businesses would be suitable for downtown, what would it take for a developer to invest in downtown, and issues like that, and how we can facilitate the growth of small businesses downtown. The second issue we're going to talk about is zoning. Obviously, that's something that has been through our town in the past, and we've always struggled with. So we're going to look at the zoning, and actually, I'm going to put this up to help a little bit here. So if you can see this pink area, and this map caused some confusion last time, but I think we've cleaned it up a little. So ignore the black line there. Main Street is going right down the middle here. This is Boston Post Road over here. This pink area, this is the part of the downtown that's currently zoned for commercial. So I think we want to maybe put some focus on that and think about, is that sufficient? Is the zoning that's in place sufficient for our purposes right now? If not, what do we need to do about it? What amendments are needed? What space is available to do something different if that's what we want to do? The next piece is infrastructure, which is, of course, sewer, septic, things like that. And Paul Pazinski is here. We're really thrilled to have him because he's really our local resident expert on all these types of issues. So we want to make sure that we're submitting as much information as we can to ULI, and hopefully they can help us tackle some of these issues. And the last group that we're gonna host is beautification connectivity. Freddie Gillespie's here. She's a member of Open Space. Also, she's involved with the Trails Committee, and she really is our local expert on all things trails and connection. And we're going to talk about different beautification efforts. I'd love to talk about bike trails and also bike racks. I'd love to talk about charging stations for electric cars. All these kind of things that will make downtown a better place to get to, a more appealing place to get to. So that's so we'll break into groups. Please feel free to join whichever group you'd like, and also to move around groups if you're want to hear more than one discussion. I'm going to ask one person from each group who plans to be there the whole time to take some notes, and then I'm going to ask one person at the end to give a 2 to 5 minute presentation of what their group concluded, and we're literally taking this information to fill out our ULI application. So your feedback is really important. We really want to make this a community-wide endeavor. So, Freddie. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you. Freddie's clarifying that she's actually not a member of the Trails Committee, but she knows quite a bit about trails.
So we've put together kind of a rough schedule for the evening. We had kind of blocked out a half an hour or 40 minutes for the breakout sessions, and then we'll reconvene for another 40 minutes or 50 minutes to have kind of an open. We'll take the summaries from each of the groups, and then the idea is to kind of have an open discussion on what some of those ideas are and give everybody an opportunity to kind of provide some feedback. But we do have some flexibility in that schedule, so as the working groups are kind of going through the different issues, if you feel like you're done early, certainly let us know. If you feel like you need a little bit more time, we've got the flexibility in the program tonight to do that. So
I think
great question.
Paul's already over here, so let's have infrastructure here. They look like they're set up. Maybe over here we can have the beautification committee. We can have investment and development maybe over here, or actually we can have it right here. And then zoning maybe.
Well, yeah, we can
just
go anywhere. We can just
wherever,
kind of
yeah.
gather around and circle some
here,
tables,
whatever,
or we can
yep.
grab this depending on how many folks we have. So
Okay.
initially, let's have the zoning folks kind of congregate over here, and then we'll figure out where the best spot
And
is.
also, just so everyone knows, we have some maps here that we hope are helpful. Feel free to kind of come and click through if there's something that you're interested in. We have about 5 or 6 different maps here. The zoning overlay one we thought was important. I'll just kind of run through them real quick. This one doesn't have the zoning overlay, but it shows the same map and it has the different parcels on it. And this is more of an aerial one, so you can kind of get your bearings there. And then these are some regional walking trails that we pulled from a TrailLink website. I'm not sure, it kind of shows what they are planning on doing and hoping to connect eventually, I think.
That one was the existing rail trails,
Okay,
prior map,
thank you,
which
yeah.
is why there's so few of them.
Yes, these are, okay. And these are kind of where the Southborough current trails are, our own local town trails. This one's a little tougher to read, but it's a wider view, and it kind of shows the larger picture of the trails.
I think we've got one more as well.
This is the rail trail potential. So this is, right?
This is the
No.
Burroughs Loop Trail.
Sorry. This is the Burroughs Loop Trail. So if you see on the dotted spots, that's what exists. And what they would like to do is fill in all the red and make a loop all through Southborough, Marlborough, Northborough, Westborough.
So and as the groups are working through some of this stuff, if you feel like you need to manipulate these maps, take a closer look at them, blow things up, shrink things down, see something a little bit different, just give me a holler and we can pull that up on the laptop and put that up on the screen as well. Okay? All right, great. Thanks, everybody. We're going to get started with kind of the larger group session now. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Oh, great. Yes, folks, we've got a sign-in sheet that's circulating around the room. If you'd like to get on our kind of mailing list that we have to make sure that you stay abreast of these issues and the work that we're doing on it, we'd love to have you on the list.
If you were at the last meeting, you're already on the list, if you signed it.
That's true as well. Okay, so let's just jump right into it and get the quick summary reports from each of the groups, and we might as well start with A,
Okay.
which I think is you, Julie.
That's me. So Craig and I, Craig was really helpful in talking about some of the issues with investment and development opportunities downtown. Obviously, we're restricted by, the property is what it is, and it's all privately owned. It's a lot of old buildings, and there's renovation of a lot of them would be very difficult. We don't own them. But something that our committee's talked about since its inception is that this corner lot on Newton Street, the only kind of blank slate in the downtown area. And so we kind of started working with that and thinking, okay, what could we do there? And obviously there's septic issues that we'll leave to the septic people, but we thought about some ideas that could potentially work. But there's also property behind it, and let's see, who's our?
Oh.
Going back down Newton Street, there are about thank you, Sujal. There are 3 properties. Let's see what the best one would be. I guess this one. There are 3 properties behind it, so hold on, where are we? Over here. So, here's Boston Road, here's Newton Street. So I think this is the lot that we're talking about. But the property behind it, I'm in the right place, right? Yeah. The about 3 properties behind it. One of them is for sale right now. I think it's this lot 10 right here. And, I'm sorry, no, the lot 1, I don't know what that is, 8. That one is actually currently for sale. We have heard rumors that there are a few other privately owned properties on that stretch that would have talked about being interested in selling the property for rezoning. And this one here is is a former mechanics shop, I believe, that is not currently being operated. So we thought that maybe has some potential right there, and it's all leading up, obviously, to the medical center down the road, which also, because one of the first things we talked about was what's the traffic, what's the foot traffic, and we talked about the resources of the student body at St. Mark's, who are right there, and also the medical center, which employs so many people. So if we could get that as kind of the keystone to downtown, or the starting place to some future development, then that might be a good option. So how do we get there? Because obviously for the town to buy property, it would have to go through town meeting. And some of the property is for sale, some of it might be for sale. It sounds like maybe some of the owners would be receptive to selling. So I think what we maybe need to do, we talked about working with the town to enter into a purchase contract if these people were amenable, if these properties are amenable, entering into a purchase contract to be contingent upon a vote at downtown, which would allow for all the other things we would need in place, like the rezoning and development of that area. Because we need a developer. We need 2 things for development to happen. We need a developer to come in, and we need a tenant to be there. So, but right now, the problem is that when potential businesses come to us, we don't have anything to offer them from downtown. So we need to put together a kind of package to present them to show that we own property that has potential for future development. So we're thinking that this might be the way to get that started. So if we could enter into a purchase contract contingent on passing town meeting, at the same time, because every time you get a new business, you have to get the use approved. So also putting together a list of potential uses that the town approves at town meeting, then maybe that would cross the first couple of thresholds. And once we own the property, if that's what we decide at town meeting, then we at least have something to present to future potential developers. So that was the crux of what we got to. Am I missing anything, Craig?
No, I think that was the main crux of kind of how you get a tenant in and how you get a landowner to participate in it. Is there has to be, you know, a meeting of the minds, and somehow that the town, if we really want to push or have this area developed, the town's going to have to play a role, you know, either a big role or a small role, but there's going to be a role for the town. And having that kind of package that Julie mentioned of incentives, of things that could be done, of ways to streamline a process for a given lot or set of lots specific to what we're trying to accomplish is going to go a long way. Because right now you have someone who comes in, they may want to be there, but now they have to find someone who will build them a building, because there really isn't a building for use down there as is. And to build a building, you now have to get the use approved. So you're not only talking about, you know, the planning process and all of that, but now you're talking about town meeting. And to be honest, no one's going to wait for a town meeting to get a use permit. They'll go to Marlboro, they'll go anywhere else. So having some way to streamline that process is really the only way that we're going to attract anybody to downtown. And with those lots being as site constrained as they are, I know another group was talking about septic and utilities and things of that nature, so I'll let you guys figure that part out. But having a bigger solution for the downtown area would also be very, very helpful.
Okay, great. Thanks very much to both of you for that summary. So our group talked about zoning, and there's been historically a lot of discussion about zoning, and we kind of started off with probably the hardest part, and I think the area with which we need to do some homework with respect to zoning, and that is understanding from a developer standpoint what the limitations are in the current zoning that have actually prevented projects from the kinds of projects that we want from moving forward in our downtown. So I think within our group, we didn't have a great handle on whether that's a setback issue, is that a use issue, is that a special permit on a use that ought to be allowed by right or ought to be allowed with some other limitation. I mean, what is it really from a zoning perspective that has held back the kinds of projects that we want? We talked a little bit about potential expansion of the Village Business District, and I think there's a limited appetite for that, but probably only in certain directions. Certainly, there doesn't seem to be much appetite, if any, for moving the Village Business District west, in large part because there's a lot of historic homes that folks like, and people live there, and they like that setting. There may be an appetite for the area that Julie was just talking about along Newton Street in this area, so that kind of dovetails nicely with what you folks were talking about. And then there was some discussion potentially about what might happen in this Park Street area, and you know, now it's kind of automotive, and with some automotive uses that have moved out. But is that what folks want forever? And now we've got a blank screen. So I'll have to wing it from there. So there was some discussion about, you know, exploring at least the possibility of expanding some of those zones. We also talked about the sort of classic tension between relaxing some of the procedural requirements that might that might be a disincentive to a developer. For example, requiring special permits on uses that we really want to encourage, while at the same time providing a mechanism for control of that process. So we see the need in some fashion for some strict controls on design, even for uses that we really want to encourage, because I think there's an appetite for things like restaurant and small-scale retail, but I don't think people want to see, I mean, the joke that came up was, you know, nobody wants to have a Hooters on the corner. You know, I don't think people want to see necessarily, you know, that kind of, you know, chain type of a restaurant. So how do we make sure that we get the kind of establishment that we want, and also that the building looks the way that we want it to look? So I think that's a tension that we need to bridge somehow. Another thing that we talked about was we spent a fair amount of time talking about the existing zoning in the downtown as well as what was proposed in the ZAC. And the ZAC had some restrictions as far as the ZAC had some relaxation of some of the setback requirements. And there was some relaxation of the permitting requirements, but does that strike the right balance? Is that going to be enough to get us where we're trying to go? And then kind of the last big piece of it was really developing a good and thoughtful inventory of what the properties are that, you know, are somewhat of a blank slate for us that we could do things with, and properties that would make good kind of adaptive reuse candidates. And, you know, really trying to work off of that list, getting the zoning in place so that then we can go out and, you know, the sort of next level for EDC type work is, okay, now you have the zoning in place, now you know what it is you want, now you know what the committee's going to support and what the town is going to support. Then it's the EDC's job to try and go out there and actually recruit the kind of stuff that folks really want. So those are the issues that we talked about from a zoning perspective. And that's it. So that takes us over to infrastructure, which I'm dying to hear about. Take it away, folks.
Well, I have been designated as the proposer
Would you like a mic?
for the infrastructure.
Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome. And some of you may know me, some of you don't. My name is Paul Pasinski. I'm an employee for the town. I work for the Board of Health, whom you elect. I'm not a member of the committee. However, in talking with Claire on several occasions, and one or two of you on separate occasions, you're probably familiar with the fact that Southborough, because of the fact that the town does not have a municipal sewer system, everything is on what was referred to as on-site septic or on-site sewage disposal. The soils are not the very best in this particular downtown area of Southborough for on-site systems. They can accommodate small systems here and there, especially for repairs. But once you get into increasing the flow or the daily flow, when you're talking about maybe a new restaurant or a new commercial venture, you're then hit with greater setback distances for the leaching area to the various tributaries, wetlands, and other water bodies, because they all flow to the reservoir. And the code, which personally some of the setbacks I detest because I don't agree with them, but nonetheless it's a state code, we have to enforce it. And these distances, these setback distances, are quite a constraint for a lot of developers thinking about putting in a larger septic system. So one of the things that came up was the fact that there is a large treatment plant, private treatment plant, down off of Newton Street, owned by Tony Kwan, Ding On Kwan, for 80,000 gallons of sewage a day, and he has a permit, and it's already in the ground. There's some final mechanicals that have to be set up to make that finally put into operation, but 99% of it is done. And he has expressed interest to various people in town about the fact that he would love to have some some private businesses tie into his structure. He has in mind some future uses, such as a senior center, assisted living, something to tie in with the Southborough Medical building, which is on-site, on sewage, and that would not be in the treatment plant. So anyway, because of the capacity that he has, this group, the infrastructure group, thought that it would behoove your committee to talk to him to see if there was some interest for some of the lots. The corner lot has been expressed, even as far down as Falcone's and that building, the brick building. There was a user that came in to talk to the Board of Health and then went away because when they found out what the limitations were for sewage disposal, they needed greater capacity than what was there presently. And again, it's one of those constraints. So we talked about a number of possible uses for expansion in this downtown area, but again, hit with the limitations of on-site sewage disposal. So it looked like maybe the committee should talk to Tony to see what the possibilities are. And again, this could be maybe just all private. It doesn't have to be even public, except for maybe getting the selectmen to okay going over town streets if they put a sewer line in, but it doesn't have to go on town streets. A lot of sewer pump stations, like recently St. Mark's, houses on School Street, are not on the street, they're on private land, on the back of some of those houses, and they tie into the treatment plant. So there's all kind of, engineering-wise, as I told Claire, anything can be done. Engineers are phenomenal professionals that can engineer anything, and so there's all different possibilities. The other thing that the committee, the group talked about was off-street parking, which they felt is a constraint for making a very suitable, pleasant downtown for people to come down there that may want to do some shopping or use some of the restaurants that may be there or in the future might be there. And there again, it's a matter of somebody looking at some of the possibilities, tying again some of the parcels that are available, and tying those together to see what sort of possibilities there may be for off-street parking. But we didn't come up with any conclusions on exactly what that should consist of. So that's something that, again, the group will have to consider very seriously, off-street parking.
Did you see it as public or private?
We never discussed that, but I would imagine it would be either one or the other or both, right? Right. Oh, we did discuss the fact that in order to make some of this a go, there would probably be the necessity for a feasibility study. Again, what is this going to cost? That's the first thing that comes up a lot of times, is what is it going to cost? And there again, that could either be all private by aggregating people who have a serious interest in wanting to do something and having them contribute to an effort, or you may want to think about tying into the coffers of the town at a town meeting with an article for a feasibility study to see what the feasibility of both the engineering for septic or tying into the treatment plant. One of the things that wasn't discussed was a treatment plant for the downtown, and I talked to Kathy Bartolini earlier. There are towns that have various types of treatment plants.
The little town of Weston.
Right, Weston. It's basically, you would never know it's a treatment plant, but it's there in the downtown action. I use the
Hydroponic technology.
hydroponic. It's like a wetland. You go in the building, it looks like a French provincial restaurant in the provinces with all the plants growing around, and so you can eat. Yeah, you can. It's so clean you can eat your lunch in there.
It's right behind the buildings in the downtown on the south side of Main Street. And when you go back there, years ago, when I was doing it, I held an evening dinner meeting so that I could show the selectmen and planning board this technology, and then told them that we were in the treatment plant.
The engineer who did the work was a fellow by the name of Pio Lombardo. Pio Lombardo Associates. He does a lot of very, very interesting, innovative, alternative on-site systems for small treatment plants, small packages, small, unusual, a lot of things that he does are down the Cape, along the coast, on the islands. He has a knack for looking into that. But again, that will cost some money.
What are the space requirements for something like that, in terms of acreage and square footage?
It depends on what the capacity of what you want the system. If you're talking about,
the building in Weston is approximately the size of the room that we're in, and the system is allowed to discharge to the water gets pre-treated and then discharged into a brook in the downtown. We have a wetland in the downtown, so there are some similarities.
Interesting.
it's fairly clean effluent. The nitrogen loads are less than 10 parts per million. Phosphorus is less than 5. Very similar to Madison Place. Madison Place is 30,000 gallons a day. Sewage, the stuff that comes out is very clean. It's a membrane filtration treatment plant, which is requires a lot of maintenance because of the fact that the membrane has to be scraped, if you will, mechanically. Actually, Tony Kwan's is a membrane filtration. The stuff that comes out, the effluent that comes out is very clean. It's not drinkable, but it looks like it's drinkable. It's clean. You can look through it. It's not opaque. So the discharge has to be put somewhere, but that has to be approved by DEP.
Thank you very much, Paul.
You're welcome.
Anything else from your group? All right, last group to wrap up is Freddie and Sue Jones' group. Oh, she's.
Freddie's right
see
there.
that.
So, yeah, so really, it was a pleasure to work with Freddie. She has got so much knowledge, and for me, it was learning a lot about preservation and trail systems. We talked about 3 topics. So we talked about connectivity was one. We talked about underutilized assets. We talked about beautification ideas, and we had a great discussion where we tried to summarize things that if we were going to go charter ULI, what would they be? So connectivity is really, it was very interesting to know that we have a lot of trails in Southborough that we don't even know about. Is that a true statement? And access and publicity. How do you access them? By access is, parking. Where do you park? How do you get there? How do you get from one to another one? So it'll be nice to actually, publicize that a little bit more, create some access points, parking so people can access those trails. We did talk about the rail track, which is, Dave, if you flip the slide a little bit, back one right there. So we talked about the rail track, which could actually serve as a con to connect a lot of these trails. So I think that's a good potential because we're all landing in the same zone all the way from where Southborough Medical is all the way to the Park Street, and we actually went as far as the number 11 Main Street, which is kind of a little bit more of an eyesore, and that actually could be like flagship for the downtown, and then build around it. So we talked about that. So that was from a connectivity standpoint is what we landed up there. In terms of underutilized assets, we talked about the Park Street, which is right next to the rail track, again, coming back there, the number 2 park down there, the triangle zone. There could be something done with that particular area. We talked about number 11 Main Street, and that's also underutilized, and no, there could be better utilization. It could become more flagship of a place, similar to like we have the town center across Route 9.
That's where the Santander Bank is. Correct?
Yes, yeah. Yes. So I think that'd be great. We talked about and Freddie can talk about the stump dump on the school street for parking and some sidewalk trails, or that could be, something for consideration. It goes a little bit further down. And then we talked.
Sorry, can you repeat that last one?
The stump dump.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah.
part of the St. Mark's deal. It's gone.
No, it's in St. Mark's and thank you.
Well, they did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you.
So
Jeez, such an attractive.
Great marketing.
we talked about number 2 Main Street, where I think there's been some concepts floated for a park. It could actually, if you take the whole zone, it's actually nice because you could have a small park with benches and bike stands, and it's central, the location, giving you access points north, south, east, west. So that was great. And then in terms of the third topic, the beautification, I think there's a pretty good alignment that the sidewalks, connectivity to the residents in this zone, in this region, should be important because that's what we're trying to build them in. There's a bias towards having some brick sidewalks with gas lamps and flower pots. So from a beautification standpoint, I'm sure we'll go through the ideas. So those were kind of our thought process. And Freddie, did I miss anything?
No, I think you did a really good job covering it, except for the one point was the causeway over the reservoir, which isn't on that map, but if you're in Fayetteville and you're trying to go downtown, and all those maps of trails, it is the missing link. It's the missing link to connect us to the Bay Circuit Trail, where you can walk from the North Shore to the South Shore. It's the missing link to what we have is the Reservoir Trail, but that's part of the Marlboro Loop. But it's also, you may recall, sorry, you wouldn't recall. I'm going to tell you. MWRA has plans for a trail from the Wachusett Reservoir in Clinton, so that you can walk from there to Cleveland Circle on the aqueducts. Now, a lot of that's doable right now. There's a few places where they have like just a pipe going across a river, and it's kind of like a catwalk. They have to figure that out. There's a couple in Framingham, I think, on the Sudbury River. But the bigger one is, again, that causeway. Well, what happens is the aqueducts stop from the west coming in. They stop at Southborough. And then from Cleveland Circle coming out, they stop at Southborough. So Southborough's the missing link for this huge plan. It's because we have the open channel and we have the reservoir. Well, if you look at the maps, we have a rail trail along the open channel, and you have the Bay Circuit Trail, but what don't you have? You don't have that causeway. And what opportunity is it? Millions of dollars to build a new bridge. The causeway's narrow, there's no breakdown lane. There is a parallel bridge, a train trestle with that train track that is a 2-rail line that only 1 rail is being utilized. I think the train comes through once a day or once a week. It's not a very heavily used one line.
The line that goes to Kent's, and I think it goes out behind Presidential.
Yes, it goes down behind Presidential. It connects to Marlboro. How many?
I believe it's 2 times a day.
So 2 times a day. There are rail lines that are high traffic, high speed on one track, that the other track is an active bike trail. It can be done. CSX, I believe, owns it, and they're not interested in it, but I will point out that MWRA within the past decade said you will never, ever get the aqueducts for walking trails, and now they are promoting walking on the aqueducts from Clinton to Cleveland Circle. So there's potential there. These rail trails, so now I'm talking not just the connectivity to downtown, but a rail trail through Southborough that connects to rail trails in Framingham, and eventually in Marlboro you could probably find a way to connect to the Assabet River Trail. Sorry, I'm spilling water.
There is off of Madison Street in the city, goes up to Hudson.
Right, so we're talking huge connectivity with, and if you know what the interest is in a rail trail, these things don't happen overnight, but if you don't start planning, all of the ones you're using today, someone started pushing for it 20 years ago or more. So, we could also connect in another way down to the Charles River Rail from the train station. That's a little bit different, but the Upper Charles Trail. Anyhow, the goal is that looking for the EDC, because now what I'm saying is you have the Marlboro Loop that can't get across the reservoir there. You have the Clinton to Cleveland Circle. You can't get across the causeway. So different peak groups are looking at getting through Southborough, and if you can, more voices, talking about how to get that rail trail done. So here we go. Right now, you only need to get across the causeway on the trestle, right? Use that track to get across. But if you get permission to use that, why not permission to have a whole rail trail? And MAPC is now working on a thing called the landline. And this is, sorry I don't have a map for you, but we just had a kickoff in Metro West, but it goes all the way from Boston out to, I think Southborough's at the western end of it. And they have a map online of all these walking trails and rail trails and planned ones and connectivity. Our rail trail's not well, I shouldn't say ours, but the potential for a rail trail through Southborough is not on that map yet, but, you know, I'm working on that. And,
Can I interrupt you with a question?
yeah, sorry.
No, this is all great information. Structurally, in terms of how the EDC moves forward on this piece, what's the best way for the EDC to kind of coordinate that? Because we're never going to be trail experts or rail trail experts or things of that nature. Is that the Open Space Commission that we should be working with, or the Trails Committee, or what do you think is the best way to kind of, you know, make that happen?
We have a Trails Committee. I know they're really busy with a lot of they're relatively new in town. They've been around for a few years, but they had a lot of work to do on the Reservoir Trail, because when they started, we didn't have any legal right to use what we had signs all through town calling the Reservoir Trail. One area we had a license or some sort of agreement, but that had lapsed, and they worked really hard to get that going. There's a piece of it they're working on right now, which is called the Peninsula. It's over by where the dam is on the reservoir, and going up in there to connect over to the Bay Circuit Trail. But again, it stops at the causeway. Working with them, but then also wherever you have, you know, what is it, ULI? Maybe they'll have some ideas, but also partnering with these other groups that, you know, if it's just our small trail committee, they're not going to get a rail trail through Southborough on their own, on a rail line that says, no, you can't use it. And also for the EDC to pay attention. I've heard little rumors here and there, and they're probably just rumors, but that maybe CSX is interested in selling. And there's an opportunity at that point, if there's a new owner, to, and again, that section comes not just across the causeway, it comes right through downtown, right next to that number 2, I think, Main Street. A great place for some bike racks. If you've ever been on a rail trail and seen what happens to the businesses around there. So I think I've talked enough about the causeway.
That's a great transition to what I wanted to mention about this, which is my experience with the Assabet River Rail Trail. And some of the discussion in Hudson and how that rail trail, you know, it used to be, from a zoning perspective, you put all the stuff that you didn't really want anywhere else backing up to the railroads, right? So along the rail trail, you've got a number of uses along there of, you know, some older families and uses that are now non-conforming, and the whole sort of nature of that corridor has changed, and what people want from that corridor has changed. So from a zoning perspective, it was something that you wanted to kind of buffer, and now all of a sudden it's reversed because people want to be abutting it, and they want to try and get close to the rail trail, and they want to get access to it. So you're seeing a trend away from, you know, these uses along what used to be the old railroad that nobody wanted anywhere near them, to now people want to be right on that. And so from a zoning perspective, it's a real opportunity, and you're absolutely right that it really changes the whole nature of the, you know, the feel of the downtown area or of that corridor generally, if you can pull those pieces together and make it happen.
And I think if you have any bicycle advocates, you know, maybe they'd want to help, you know, our trail in Southborough are just walking trails, but I think there could be a lot of excitement generated if there was ever a possibility for a rail trail in Southborough, because as we know, most of our streets are not safe for children to ride their bikes on. And, you know, even if we did that, we would still, the other point we talked a lot about, and to our trails now, is we need parking. Because if you're on the south side of town, you can't, you know, you can't just walk to the Reservoir Trail or the Bay Circuit Trail, because, there's no way to get across the reservoirs, right? So very narrow causeways, and you can't walk there with your kids or ride a bike. So if you are coming from the south side to access those great regional trails, you need to be able to have a place to park. And as I told my partner there, that I'm not telling you where I park because there's only like 2 spaces. But I know where there's some potential, places that you could put some parking to, right now, access the Reservoir Trail, and it could also provide parking for people going downtown in the future.
Great, thank you very much, Freddie. Thanks, Sujal. At this point, it's about 10 after 9, so we could do one of two things. You folks have given our committee a ton of information and feedback, which we certainly appreciate as we kind of move forward with ULI and start to design that study a bit. But I also don't want to give folks who have something that they want to say and get in front of us. I'm not trying to shut it down, but I do have an eye on the clock. So I will take the will of the room in terms of how we kind of move forward from here. Originally, we had thought this would be, kind of an open discussion and forum, so happy to entertain that. Going once? Going twice? It must be the hour.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thanks very much, folks.
everybody.
This has been great for us, and we really appreciate the feedback.